Have you ever wondered what is psychology really as a construct, and how did it come to be? Have you ever pondered the difference between doing good and great work? Or how about how to age gracefully? Well, dear listener, I hope you're feeling curious today as we explore some of the big questions on life and the meaning of our existence and how to wrestle with our desires and those ever-present nudges to conform to societal behaviors and traditional metrics of success versus how to work out what will be our best and most useful work for us to do. And on the show to help me explore these topics is none other than Dr. Stephen Porges, the brilliant researcher and discoverer of polyvagal theory. That specific theory is a big topic, and I did an in-depth breakdown of it in the last episode. And from his work, Stephen has greatly impacted several fields, including therapy for how we help individuals deal with trauma, anxiety, and stress, as well as education, workplaces, military, and as I highlighted, of course, mindset and personal growth. This conversation pairs very well with the last episode, as Stephen is a brilliantly deep thinker who likes to uncover fundamental truths using first principles to get to the heart of the frustrating why questions that we have. And it's brilliant to see how far-reaching some of the big questions we can ask in life. You can then tie back to some of his work where he's been able to reach answers on it. And so it would help to have a basic understanding of polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve, and neuroception, ideally before listening to this episode by listening to the last one, but I will give a brief summary of the basics in a second. But firstly, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology Show with me, Sam Webster. As always, we are exploring the real science of self-improvement and what it means to live a life well lived. This episode is full of curious take-homes, so please stick around for after the break.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Selling a little or a lot? Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your own online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. 36% better on average compared to the other leading commerce platforms. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Get a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo. Shopify.com/promo.
So I promised a basic outline on polyvagal theory. Essentially, the body's nervous system is constantly scanning our surroundings for threats beneath our conscious awareness. And if it picks up any pattern of problems in one of its senses, that could be a touch or smell that feels off or a room layout that is incorrect. Well, once it is triggered, the nervous system can control via our vagus nerve a change of state to fight or flight mode or shutdown mode. And these processes are controlled at a completely subconscious level and changes things like our heart rate, pupil size, digestion, blood flows. It can even limit our capacity for rational thought. And the big take home is how safe we feel is crucial to our physical and mental health. It affects our outcomes in life if we feel safe enough to take risks and handle feedback, or if we feel like we have to conform at all costs and avoid failure. So the last episode on fear, emotional intelligence, and polyvagal theory is really an eye-opening one for anyone who wants to be a better parent, to do better at work, or live simply in more harmony with themselves. But on to today. It is incredible to have Stephen on the show to really dive into the deeper questions of life and how to build more security in following our curiosity and how to help nurture that in others. On the subject of curiosity, I found it curious that for me, he came across as one of the most relaxing people to talk to, and he instantly put me in a very open-minded state where I felt I was in a non-judgmental environment, despite the fact I was talking to one of the biggest legends in psychology still living today. And I should say that this was a more divergent conversation, if you will. And in psychology, we have two learning modes: the diffuse mode, where we research widely, follow broad interests, and we're very open-minded. And then we also have the focused learning mode, where we're very analytical, we stay in our lane just to master one thing. So in the last episode earlier this week, we were in our focused mode thinking. It was all about purely learning polyvagal theory at its core. Now, this episode is our diffuse mode thinking episode, where we take that information forward and we look at how we can use that to help us build safety and curiosity into any decisions and guide our life at a wider level. I have edited out some of the more esoteric tangents that we may have got on and were a bit off topic to try and keep the episode consistent. And I also carved out an entire second episode on the topics of free will and our concept of pain and loss that I will release in the future to make sure that this episode stayed a bit tighter. But even with all of that work, there will still be the odd moment that feels like a topic jump. And you'll have to trust me that actually Stephen is often just taking a deeper step down or step up on the topic to answer it at a more fundamental level. And actually the whole episode ties together incredibly tightly, even if it feels like we're jumping around a bit. I honestly found this conversation one of the most impactful ones I've had in a long time. And so with that very long introduction, I am very delighted to share this interview with Stephen Porges. We start on the topic of how you can break down the concept of psychology to its deeper core fundamental truths. And we do use that to act as a bit of a guiding principle for a lot of the rest of the episode.
I would start off by saying, basically, we're living in a Rubik's Cube world where we basically have a surface which has a lot of different constructs, but underneath it, there's some basic core features. And we have to function literally like an AI machine. We collect all this information, and we have to say, what's the common theme? And one of the problems is, psychology is so attractive because it has to do with our own personal experiences, how we interpret the world, how we relate to the world, how we respond to the world. But psychology is really, I would view it as constructs that live on top of other constructs, meaning that we're a neurobiological organism. So we don't have mental activity without an underlying nervous system, and our nervous system is really evolved and shares principles with very primitive organisms. And so in a sense, we're driven by some of the same features of very primitive organisms. And that is, are we safe or are we under threat? And what happens when our body, our physiology shifts into threat? Well, the psychological principles or features or constructs are quite natural. Under threat, we become anxious, we become hypervigilant, and we come up with words because you're paranoid or overly concerned or you're cautious. We'll come up with all kinds of psychological constructs. But then when our body doesn't feel like it's under threat, who are we? We become curious, we explore, we can become compassionate, we can be benevolent, we can be accessible to others. So we change in terms of all the features of who we are.
Yeah, and I think creating a good environment for learning is all about making people feel safe to be curious and explore and fail in a manner where they don't feel judged.
Yeah. So, but what you said, there's a truthful reality to it that is more complex than merely saying making people feel safe. And so the issue is, do we make people feel safe or do we allow them to be safe? So in a sense, is it an operant instrumental behavior? I'm going to feel safe, or am I evaluating the context that's giving me literally permission to be safe? So it's literally how we see ourselves and how we see our own, let's say, executive functions or agency. And really, we're affected by the world, and we don't control all of the world or even a lot. So we have to be extraordinarily respectful of how our body is wired to react to the world before we start to impose these demands about, I must be safe. So how are we safe in a challenging, dangerous world?
Yeah. possibly is a good point to then explain your angle of research on polyvagal theory to then come back to explain more.
Well, we live our own, we live our own words, so for me, my journey was trying to understand a lot of the things that you're asking. Why do I react to the world differently? And why do I react to people differently? Why do I feel good with people or places? Why am I hypervigilant and overly concerned?
Can I ask a question quickly?
Yeah.
Sorry. When you're saying, why am I reacting differently? Do you mean, why are you personally reacting differently to how you see other people react? Or why are you reacting differently in different situations depending on like different stimuli?
The latter. So I'm basically saying, as a self-observer, I'm asking myself these basic questions, which I think that's part of your journey. You're asking yourself the question, why am I? And then does my response pattern, does it mirror or mimic other people? In a sense, is it a template for humanity, or is it an idiosyncratic feature of me? And I think we're all in that type of journey of, are we different or are we the same? And let's start off with how we are the same, because that's really an easy one to start with. And that is, we're the same because we have basically this similar wiring, have the same underlying structures. The structures respond to certain features in a very reliable way across individuals, and in fact, across many mammalian species. Loud noises, low frequency sounds, rumbles, high-pitched cries. We react to them. They're wired into us, how we respond. What about a melodic voice, like a mother talking to a baby, a good mother, a mother that calms the baby, a lullaby? The melodic voice of the mother triggers in the baby to give up defenses. Now, for you as an interviewer, you've interacted now with several interviewees, and you probably have what we would say gut reactions to different people.
Yeah, I've felt some intuitions of like how I could take this conversation compared to other ones where you feel like you sort of have to nurse. Yeah, it's interesting.
Okay, so you used a word. This is really going to be the theme of our dialogue. Is it intuition, or was it, in a sense, a neural reflex?
Yeah.
So I would say you're wired to respond to certain voice patterns, certain intonations. Then you try to make sense of why you responded, and you call that my intuition. But it's the acknowledgement of the reaction, and I call that neuroception, because it's a detection of certain features in the environment. It's not perception. I didn't infer that that's what's occurring, but it was a reaction. Now that reaction changed my physiology, my gut feeling, and through another process, which is called interoception, I feel my body, and now I make sense of it. For you interviewing people, you're always on the fly trying to make sense of the relationship with the interviewee. The features, there are going to be some common features. And it's not merely the words that people are saying. So you may think, I don't want to be pedantic on this, but you may think that as a podcaster, it's all about the content of the words. The content of the words are important, but you're not going to get entree into the dialogue, into the interaction, without let's say, a visceral response. That is the body being accessible to learning or to taking information. And that is where prosody or intonation of voice is important, because it triggers the nervous system to move out of states of defense to be more accessible.
Yeah. I have two questions. Firstly, were you always this calming as a person, or is this something you've really developed from all your research?
Love the question, because I'll just, quite a well-known, famous person, now he's famous anyway, sent me an email once, and he said, I've been just watching your YouTubes, and I feel so calm. Thank you. Well, the other one was a person who had known me for a few decades said that somewhere along the line, his theory and his presence became the same. So in a sense, the talk was the theory. So the use of intonation and prosody is really the expression of the theory and its ability to calm and make other people accessible. So the answer, no, it's been a journey. It's not an intentional journey. So it's not like I'm superimposing on who I really am, this intonation. I'm actually getting into the flow. I'm enjoying the interaction. I'll put this in another way, and this is something that I had forgotten. I was in a conference where I was being interviewed with an opera singer who lost her voice and then literally discovered polyvagal theory. She was a relatively famous opera singer in Europe. And what I learned from her was that every night when she sang, it was like singing to a house full, an audience, an arena of predators. She was under great threat when she was singing. So she's now faking it. She's trying to, quote, appease. And what happens is that, so she's using intonation in her voice, she's smiling, she's doing that, but it's not consistent with her physiology. And then the system literally couldn't do it anymore, and she lost her voice. And what dawned on me is that what about all these performers, these musicians, these singers, these actors, how they literally have mental breakdowns in the sense that I am the audience and I'm buying into it, that they are, engaging in their accept. And the answer is no, they're appeasers. They're just like people who have been abducted by predators and they're under a severe physiological challenge. And I felt so sad because I enjoy the interactions. And I just said, it's like saying, how can people not enjoy interacting with other people? And I had to realize that they were like captives. They were, in a sense, under a threat physiology while trying to appear to be accessible.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way you explained that. I think it's it's a very severe example for people that are elite performers on stages, but then I feel it's a problem for a lot of people, and more generally, how you portray your life on social media or showing up for work and things it's a bit of a performance for something that maybe isn't quite what you felt you should be doing with your life. Or I did a whole episode I made up a concept called social pressure personality disorder, just for fun, and diagnosed it, but then concluded that quite a lot of people have some problems with how they perceive the world to themselves. And a lot of what I find myself trying to teach people is just settling into being themselves without being too find yourself, just kind of chilling out and relaxing a bit more and being comfortable with who you are, which again, I think a lot of polyvagal theory actually then comes into being more relaxed with where you're at and what you're doing.
So if you truly embrace polyvagal theory, you're left with one simple point, and that is, what is the gift we have for others? We have our own accessibility. And it's a very interesting gift because when we're accessible to others, they become accessible to us. And so what you're describing is this quite disorder, which is really not a disorder that it's a disorder of accessibility, really.
Yeah. It's just sort of a bit of a training that isn't quite correct, but it's not a disorder.
Right. It's like, okay, so there was a social psychologist, I heard her talk once, and the statement was, fake it until you make it. And that is not polyvagal.
Yeah. Oh, I love taking common advice and then be like, but actually, if you think about it, there's some really bad implications if you follow it logically.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And let's go to my list.
If you fake it, then you're not getting the feedback of that accessibility. You're not getting any of the rewards, but you're presenting. And I think that's part of what you were talking about. Social, what was the term you used?
Social pressure personality disorder.
Yeah. So it's this idea of presenting oneself in a specific way. And I think fake it until you make it is an attribute of that disorder.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to be making up disorders and people have enough problems to get more labels, but yes.
It's okay.
I only did it for fun purposes.
Other people have, and it's part of making the reality for a certain people. Now, my perspective is not creating all these massive number of constructs, but literally mining down to core features. And the core features tend to be a biology of threat or safety. And interestingly, we've had a real well-developed physiology of stress, but a very poorly developed physiology of safety.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I definitely feel like I hear way more about all the different stresses. When you think of it from a lens of safety, a lot of the things that we're doing put ourselves under stress and we don't quite work out why we aren't feeling safe. Just introspecting on my own times of stress.
Yeah, replaying your mind, what you're saying. You're putting the responsibility on the individual not to be stressed. And I'm going to ask you, how well does that work?
Not great.
No, because we think it's like saying, I'm scared. And someone says, you have nothing to be scared of. Well, the issue is under threat, we can remove the features that we think are causing threat, but they may not change the person's physiology. So we have people who are, in a sense, tuned to look for threat in our culture, in our society. And we think that we can make them, let's say, more benevolent, more generous, more self-regulated, more co-regulated, if we take away the so-called identifiable features that they attribute to their anxiety or their stress. And the answer is probably not, because they're kind of wired, or let's say wired because that may be misinterpreted. They are retuned, meaning that there's the possibility of them being more optimally tuned. But to be more optimally tuned, they have to be more accessible to signals of safety.
I feel like there's a lot of things to unpack there. And there was plenty of things to unpack. So stay tuned after the break as we learn about the nature of fuzzy, unsafe environments and the paradox of needing safety, yet it is threat and difficulty that is the source of our great work, motivation, and even humor. Stay tuned to find out. This episode is sponsored by Factor because I love my food. And I also love putting time and effort into cooking delicious food. But I don't always have time. And on the nights that we don't have time to cook, what has become a bit of a default for us is often eating pizza. And that isn't ideal. I have been seeking something healthy and equally delicious. And Factor meals are a game changer. With over 35 different meals that can be prepared to suit your needs, so calorie smart or extra protein, vegan, as you wish. They have everything and they're fresh, never frozen meals are ready to eat in 2 minutes and approved by dietitians. So however busy you are, you can still enjoy nutritious, really, really good tasting food. So if you're interested, head to factormeals.com/growthmindset50, or you can use the code growthmindset50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That is code growthmindset50 at factormeals.com/growthmindset50. Steve Jobs once famously said that design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. I've had my Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 for a while now, and I have to say, it is one of the best designed things I've owned. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it feels really good to hold. But most importantly, it works so well. I've never been so consistently well shaved in my life because it's so enjoyable and easy to keep everything in trim. You can take it in the shower, it has a light to see what you're doing, the trimmer blades have skin-safe technology so you can feel confident putting it anywhere. So if you could take better care of your body and face hair situation, Manscaped are offering listeners of the show free international shipping and 20% off your order with promo code GROWTH at manscaped.com/growth. Even if you are a customer already, you can grab 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com/growth. Links are in the description.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your site will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.
So if you're saying someone's more attuned, is that like if they didn't perceive any threats, that's also a threat, so they're going to start looking for other threats, for example?
Oh, I would think so. You tell me.
So yeah, sometimes I can get that impression from some people that like, okay, if something hasn't gone wrong, that's almost a worry because of something should have gone wrong by now?
Okay, I spent so many decades within an academic environment. Academic environments are not fuzzy and safe. They're very evaluative by nature. And what is evaluation to our nervous system? It's a threat. So education is based on evaluation. Medicine is based on evaluation. We bathe ourselves in threat. And so we start understanding that we can get that next paper published. We can get the next grant funded. We can be elected to this office or whatever it is. But that's not going to change who we are because we're in the context of being an academic. We're not allowed, we're not giving permission to give up this motivation or this hypervigilance to succeed, to generate, to produce. And we can see this in the business world too. It's not like, oh, I make a certain amount of money and I'm transformed.
Sure.
It doesn't quite happen that way because the issue is, it's not how much money you make. It's not set up to say, I need this amount to live a good life. It's about this amount of money places me on a hierarchy of other people. Where does it place?
Yeah.
And it's just not a healthy world when we keep doing that. So my personal journey has been, at what point can I say I have enough so that I can allow my body to be what it really is, or allow me to be me without having to worry about what people think of me, because what they think of me determines the resources that I can generate.
Yeah, and you can't really control it anyway. I've definitely found like a lot of what I'm trying to teach is your concept of success is something that's been given to you by other people, and things like money and stuff it's hard to wrap your head around where you're even going with it. You just get like the concept of like more is better, but you haven't really worked out what you actually want with the more, and you can kind of usually pare it back a lot and think more about other things. We both live kind of near the beach because that's something that every day you feel the benefit of it. And I don't like having too many meetings, so I spend most of my time writing stuff I find interesting. It took me a while to work that out, but I'm identifiably happier. This year I haven't earned much money, but it could work out. It could make lots more money if I keep on doing it, but I'm not too under pressure.
Let's ask the basic questions, and that is, what do you need to live the type of life that you want to live? It's as simple as that. It depends if you have kids, if you have spouses, if you have older parents, if you have certain financial demands, it limits the flexibility that you have because you no longer literally own your own body and your own resource. You have responsibilities to others. And part of our community, our world, is about people taking on responsibilities for others in almost a vague way. We don't know what those responsibilities are or who those people are, but we feel we have to. So I will tell you my personal journey. When I hit 50, I looked around at colleagues in academics. I looked at them and saw who they were as they were aging out. Because when you leave academics or get pushed out, when you're in your late 60s or in your 60s, although you can stay a little longer now, the issue is you become marginalized within that community because there's also age-appropriate behavior. So the answer was I didn't see any good models because people felt that as they aged out, they were losing their sphere of influence, which just made them more aggressive, more unhappy. And I just saw that as really a tragic journey of being an academic. And I said, it's not the journey that I want. So I have to, in a sense, restructure for me what it is I want to get completed on the academic side, and what is my true goal in life, and what is the frustration of being an academic. The frustration for me, that was the translation of ideas into practice. And that's where polyvagal theory came. That's how that has literally enabled my ideas to go outside of academics. And that to me has been literally, that's my personal transformative experience, because now it was no longer related to, let's say, the 10 people who understood what I was doing within academics. It was now to a greater world. And I could start translating these ideas into public policy, into public problems, and I could see it grow and how I could empower other people to be creative. And that was really very empowering, or let's say self-validating. So the issue was, how could I move from the criteria of success which was defined in a way that you could never be successful. It's almost like professional sports where you get older, you can't keep the batting average up. Well, baseball's no longer the major sport, but you can't keep your numbers up. And so you become marginalized and almost a tragic figure by the time you're pushed out. Academics has some of the same thing. It's not pushed out in the same way. You may be revered in an abstract way, but you become the odd person who's at conferences and no one wants to engage.
Oh, it's sorry to hear that. Yeah. I definitely resonated with, I wouldn't say, so I came from more like the startup world. I wouldn't say people, I think, if you've been massively successful in startup, you should have still have an aura. But I did find that more than 90% of people I was ever in contact with were just so stressed. And I just didn't aspire to be a stressed person. And was like, okay, I'm in this world where all the people I know are so stressed. Like, where is it going to lead me? Probably more stressed. I could probably do something else and enjoy it better. And it really pushed me to kind of think differently of what I was trying to achieve.
Let me ask Sam, when you were in that world, what were the markers or the benchmarks of being successful?
Yeah, it was very much company performance of either like revenue and turnover or raising funds, and everyone was just on a sort of, especially if you get into the VC area of startup, it's all about, are you on track to raise your next rounds, and you have to kind of 10x every 2 years. There's no concept of having a break or celebrating your successes or chill. Whereas if you start your own business just for having a lifestyle business, I actually way more appreciate lifestyle business owners who are having fun and doing something useful enough to fund their own environment, as opposed to growth at all costs, where I'm like, well, maybe you're just, one of the costs is going to be your mental health for the entire time. What's the point of burning yourself out for 10 years to then have a few million at the end of it if you've lost 10 years of your life that you could have been enjoying? I'd rather be enjoying it. And sure, the actual art of building things is enjoyable. It's just sort of getting the right balance and doing it on your terms, I think, is not something people think about when they first start a business.
So are there any models of people who have done this and had, let's say, able to do this and then be transformed into an individual who was basically felt successful and satisfied?
Yeah, I think there are people who have felt pretty satisfied afterwards. I do think a lot of entrepreneurs, I think some of the most famous, best entrepreneurs just have an inability to be satisfied, which is what drives them. Like if you look at Steve Jobs, Elon Musk,
that's my point.
I don't aspire to be them.
Even Musk, I think Musk is pretty classic.
Because I used to think, these guys are the coolest people ever. And now I'm like, I don't think they're ever going to be happy. And well, great. It's cool to have massive impact on the world, but it doesn't actually matter. You don't experience being the rest of the world. You only experience being yourself. And if you can't enjoy that experience, it seems a bit wasted.
To me, okay, so that was really what I was seeing in academics. I was trying to say, I don't want to fall into that pit, because what you see with people like Musk is how much money can you generate? How much, like you can become, in a sense, a visionary. People can think that you're really remarkable, and then you really don't feel remarkable unless you have to keep running, and you have to, in a sense, be functionally abusive to other people around you. So you're trying to see what is the transformative moment where a person who has impacted on the world, so that's a real positive thing, feels good about themselves so that they can present themselves in the way in which they are accessible as a human being.
Definitely. I feel, I don't know how happy Einstein was, for example, but I did feel like he was doing things more for his own enjoyment, and he just was really curious and following his interests.
Yeah, I think enjoyment is, we got to put this kind of on the side a little bit, because I think academics, enjoyment is redefined, because it's not play, it's curiosity and it's insights. It's literally intellectual. When ideas kind of like fit together and say, whoa, where did this come from? It's very exciting. And then when you take, let's say, a hypothetical idea and you try to make a product from it, and the product works, We could say that's fun, a sense of fulfillment and a sense of a privilege. So fun, again, I think playfulness, I understand. The concept of fun, I still, as a psychological construct, am still kind of struggling with it.
I feel like you're quite playful with an intuition I had pretty early on, which was nice for my neuroception gauged.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, I do find that is certainly useful for being a creator. Really, what you're doing is having good taste and finding things that are interesting and fun enough to be engaged by. As an interviewer, I'm just trying to search for like the best stories or interesting facts and things. Or if I'm writing, I'm just trying to make it as enjoyable as you also learn stuff. So I'm a bit confused by it. As in, so curiosity and playfulness versus fun.
I think you're saying the same thing. I'm saying curiosity is a type of playfulness, because where does play come from? It's a degree of things that are not predictable. It's unexpected. In fact, humor comes from violation of expectancy, even peekaboo. Our bodies like the curiosity. They like the exploration. They like the challenge of things not always being predictable. But we need predictability to feel physiologically safe enough. And so this is the conflict. The conflict is we need our context to be predictable. And that what we call a safe womb or a safe room or friendships or relationships. And when we have that, then we can explore with great playfulness and curiosity. But we can't do it all. So we have to, in a sense, be taken care of, or our environment has to be sensitive enough to our basic needs. The way I would view it is, do you have a dog by any chance?
I have had dogs. I don't have any at the moment.
Okay, so you've taken dogs for...
Yeah.
Okay, and tell me, on a leash, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when they do their job, they're seated, and what they do with their head? Do they look at you before they...
Usually they're like, I did the thing.
No, it's before. They're looking at you to make sure they're safe enough to do their bodily function.
Sorry, before, yes, they think about it a bit and like, is this okay?
Yeah, I'm safe, because when they're doing that, there's a vulnerability.
Yeah, you definitely sense it. They're like, oh, this is a bit private.
Right.
Yeah, whereas cats will like disappear. They don't want to be seen at all.
So think of creativity as something simpler. It's like we want to be safe enough that our creativity and our exploration can express itself without the vigilance of protecting us. Kind of like a dog pooping. It's like giving permission, basically, not to look after ourselves.
Yeah. This is funny. So I was, don't know why this is giving me an idea, but I was writing something that was a bit out there, and I was kind of halfway through a draft. I had this idea around the concept of time just being a river. All we have is some years you just make some patterns in like this river of time before that's the end. Like it's kind of a draft and it's a bit messy. And my friend was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, nothing. And they just sort of didn't want it to, I was just a bit too sensitive, where I was like, obviously happy for him to read it once it's done. But it's like, I sound like a mad person. You don't need to read this right now. And like, yeah, just kind of reminded me of being a dog.
Yeah. Well, so I actually had that metaphor with a colleague who stayed at one university for his whole career, and then he retired.
Yeah.
If you think of what happened when he retired, was he had no friends anymore because they had all moved on. The river moved on, the university changed, and he was still in the house he had been in for over 30 years. And the department had changed, and now he didn't know what to do. And it was very sad to watch. And so time was moving and people were moving, and he was locked into that space. He was an observer of the river in front of him without understanding the consequence it would have on him.
Yeah, it's nice that you at least tried to explain that to him.
Well, I didn't try to explain it to him because it was too sad, because he was trying to basically tell me how he was still impactful. It was like, it's not, and the issue was, rather than saying, I've been here, I've observed, now there are younger people coming in and things change, and I'm no longer part of this. He was trying to say, I'm still part of it. This is what I saw when I turned 50, is that this understanding that this is a dynamic flow in front of you. And if you try to maintain your sphere of influence, just going to be a tragic story. Yeah, a sad story at the end.
Sort of like, not to get political, kind of like Biden of lately.
Well, I think we can talk about that because Biden really was a trigger to me because you could see in real time he was losing function, that he couldn't do the same things, which is part of aging. What was his response, or the response of the Democratic Party, is you got to get your act together. You got to go out there and campaign more. Well, when you're 81 or the resource isn't there. And so there's a tragedy of a disrespect for one's own humanity. And the issue is, look, you're 81. You're doing great. You're not 65, or 45. And so you have to understand the biological limitations, and you can't do it, and it has consequence on everyone else. So it's now a more complex situation. It's not intentionality. And we're from a culture that thinks that everything is intentionality. You would be smarter if you tried harder. You would be wealthier if you tried harder. Sometimes you have limitations of physical handicaps, aging, and mental issues, and basic health.
For sure. An interesting sort of inflection on the discussion point. I think that's one of the issues for people with the growth mindset is it sounds like it's going to be a promise of everything. And I'm like, well, obviously you can't do everything. You have to make choices, and there are some physical limitations. Like, you can always get better at basketball, but you might not become Michael Jordan. Yeah, some people just like, oh, it sounds like airy-fairy, you're just promising people everything. And I feel polyvagal theory also can get labeled in the sort of mysticky confusion stuff, which is completely inaccurate when it's actually like a really scientific area.
The simplest part of polyvagal theory is that your physiology affects your behavior, and your physiology responds to context. It's as simple as that. And it really says that there's certain basic rules you can extract. When your physiology moves to certain states, your range of behavior goes with it. The part of all this, I was going to go back to my academic experiences, because what a professor sees over decades is that some people have a lot of talent. Some people score high on tests, but don't seem to have the creativity, the curiosity, and the ability to integrate ideas. And we really don't have good assessments. We tend to accept people into programs based upon scores and grades. That's why some of them are very unsuccessful. They might be able to get good scores and good grades, but when they're basically forced, and they are forced, to develop independent research, the metric of success in academics, then they often fall apart. The demands are too great. It's not a simple skill set. They can't try harder. They just don't have that type of mind, that capacity. And I think we do a disservice when we think that everything is based on just trying harder. It's kind of like what we're saying with basketball. I think music is the same thing. I was a really fine clarinetist when I was young, and I was thinking about going into music. However, in my own, let's go back to my own gut feelings, I just wasn't a musician. I could play, I was skilled, I mastered the instrument, but I was not a musician. It wasn't in me. The decision was relatively easy. I thought about it, and then it just didn't make sense, because my curiosity was really in what I do now. I've always been interested in these basic questions. So in a way, we can have certain skills, and we can be misled by our skills that don't map into our passions and our curiosity.
For sure. We definitely just get reinforced when we're young of like, oh, you got some natural talent at this thing, do more of that thing. And then you get there and you're like, not sure I want to do it. I always studied engineering for like 1 month because I had maths and physics scholarships, and that was the thing I was good at. And I was terrible at English and also kind of worse at biology and psychology because you actually have to do some writing. Yeah, after like 1 month of engineering, I was like, I really don't want to study the safety values of concrete anymore. And like, I enjoyed the maths, but I was just, I just went to a few biology lectures and was like, oh, my curiosity is back. And so I just changed course to do biology and psychology and didn't look back. It was great, but it was certainly harder initially to get good grades. But yeah, I had a lot more fun, which I'm not sure if I had a whole year off before I went to university, sailing around the world and doing odd stuff. I don't think I'd have had the interoception to notice.
Coming back to the word fun, which you just used, it's really very much overlaps with your interest in curiosity, exploration.
Definitely. Okay, just jumping in for one final short break before we find out Stephen's answers to the very real problem of wanting to do too many things and some psychological and physiological answers to the rhythms of life. When I was an adventurous 10-year-old, I really wanted to sleep the entire summer in the garden, but quite sensibly, my mum vetoed the idea. Out of protest, I slept on the floor of my room instead. And I don't personally recommend it at all, but I do recommend my sponsor, Cozy Earth, whose sheets both my partner and I are a little bit obsessed with. I never thought that I'd care about sheets that much, and yet here I am, a grown adult who will excitedly show any visitor to my house just how amazing my sheets are, because God Almighty, they are another level of comfort I did not realize was possible. And compared to my summer of sleeping on the floor, this summer is shaping up to be the best sleep of my life, with their toxin-free sheets made using bamboo viscose that only gets softer with use. And yes, maybe I have learnt to appreciate some luxury in my life, and you can too at cozyearth.com with a 35% discount off of any order using my code GROWTH. That's cozyearth.com, discount code GROWTH. One question I do have, I guess, is, because you said you felt like you were an academic but not a musician. What happens if you feel like you're everything?
Oh,
Because if I studied music production for a while, I feel like, I need to write some albums. I did a bit of YouTubing. I loved it, but I didn't have the time to do it properly compared to the level of podcasting. Another one of my weird things I'm writing about is that you can only wear one dress at once as a concept. And like, you might want to show up in all these different personalities and flavors of yourself. Me doing my YouTube channel is another flavor of my personality. Me writing an album is another flavor of my personality that I haven't expressed if all I'm doing is running a podcast. But I can't be all my personalities at once. I can only wear one dress at once, kind of thing.
So I have a metaphor which I call the Zen of dishwasher loading.
Okay.
And that is how you put the dishes in the dishwasher and the intensity and your thought process in doing it. The model is whatever you focus on, if you focus enough on it, it explains everything. So even the Zen of dishwasher loading starts having all kinds of attributes of relationships, of space and time. But the part is that for me, as I got deeper into my own science, I was creating new metrics. I was doing the math behind it. I was studying evolution. I was studying all these different disciplines. So the interesting part about polyvagal theory is that it's really the culmination of transdisciplinary work by many others over several, I would say hundreds of years. So it is a deep integration of a complex literature. And that's what makes it, on some level, a core reality that people understand it intuitively. But if they're trained in any one discipline, they don't have the toolkit to understand all the features or the justification of it. So it's not like if you're an anatomist, you understand the neurophysiology or the quantitative methods or the impact on the psychology. It's really a culmination. So for me, I literally created my own science. It's not like I violated the rules of science, but I created my own theory. I created the metrics. I borrowed from a variety of disciplines, and I integrated them to come up with what fed my curiosity. Now, back to music. So now I'm developing with a colleague who is a composer, brilliant guy. His name's Anthony Gorey. We're creating what we were initially calling polyvagal music. And basically it embeds in musical composition the endogenous rhythms of the body to signal the brainstem to support homeostatic function, to heal. So it's basically music of healing. It's really profound when you experience it. It has all kinds of unique rhythms embedded in the music. So tempo is not constant. Tempo is rhythmically changing. There's lots of movement with the frequency bands. It's very visceral. You feel it in your body. It's very dynamic. But so I'm now, I'd say, a partner in composition. Even though I'm not the musician, what I tell my collaborator is he was a performer and he's very, I would say, skeletal motor, body movement, rhythmic. So you have, in a sense, a skeletal mode. We call that dance and marching. That's when our body moves with music. I said, I'm viscerally rhythmic. I'm dealing with the rhythms of my bodily organs. It's a different aspect of rhythmicity. When we say, do you have rhythm in our Western world, do you know what we mean by that? We mean, does your skeletal motor system go with the tempo? It's very movement oriented and it's very metabolically costly. We don't say, do your organs move with the music? Does your digestion flow with the music? Does your heart rate rhythms go with the music? Does your breathing, in a sense, this calming physiological nurturance? That's visceral rhythms.
That's interesting. I'm very intrigued to hear what that actually sounds like and if things happen inside me.
They will.
Cool.
The interesting part is that we've demoed it actually at 3 conferences this summer. 1,500 people. No one was told what they were supposed to feel. It's quite reliable what they feel. They feel the rhythms going through their body. They feel it in their digestive tract. They feel like rhythmic hugs their body. For some of them, just listening to a few minutes, they felt transformative experiences because they felt safe in their body. So like everything else that I've done is really about co-regulation and engagement. This is about co-regulation of brain and viscera. So it tries to get these regulatory systems. But when can we deal with regulating our bodily organs? When we're not vigilant. So it, in a sense, turns off the expectancy that I have to engage you or something's coming around from behind me. And metabolically, my only concern is, can I service my bodily organs? And how do I feel when that feedback reaches my brain? I feel like I'm floating on a raft without the possibility of falling off in the slow waves of the ocean. That's what I'm feeling. If you visualize that feeling of the slow rocking without any vigilance of falling off, what's your own body? What do you think? How does your mind feel? Is it a pleasant sensation?
Yeah, I'd imagine it's very restful and relaxing. One thing I found was I sleep amazingly well on boats, having lived on boats for a while. There's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of picturing that in my mind.
That's a commonality. The ocean waves are very similar to our bodily rhythms. And what do you do with babies? You rock a baby.
Interesting.
So it's wired in us. It's who we are. We like slow, rhythmic activity.
Yes, I do like running, which might be related.
No, it's not. So running, you run for recreation or state regulation. What do you do?
Well, yeah, I'd never thought it was related to rhythm until you said that. I have plenty of other reasons why I know I run that I do like, but I was just wondering if there's something else internally that's a bit...
Well, it does have some rhythms, but the rhythms are really going to be much more metabolically demanding. So, and skeletal motor, once we recruit skeletal motor with rhythmicity, it's metabolically costly.
Okay, interesting.
By the way, I was a runner when I was very young, but I was a sprinter.
Oh, cool. What sort of sprinting?
It was not meters then, it was yards then. And it was 100 and 220, which is similar to 100 meters and 200 meters. I was good enough to place in the state meet. I was good enough, but not good. There's a difference. I think what music and track gave me was an understanding of what good enough is versus what really great is. I wasn't great. There were limitations, and I started to appreciate the limitations. And with the limitations, you can then start appreciating what you're doing within that space as play.
Yeah, that's a really profound lesson. Yeah, I found the last 10 minutes. I found everything you said very interesting and inspiring. Definitely your concept of how you can learn lots by going into one area. I've always found, like I said, even just in psychology, it's not just one area, but the whole level of science, I kind of picture it as a bit of a staircase of like, from the one end, you've got physics, which is the very pure interaction of stuff, to philosophy that's just thinking, but it's still...
You know what you would like? You would like to study the history of psychology. So when it started in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and when they were literally trying to make it into a science that mimicked physics and studied mental activity and sometimes subjective activity. It was very interesting. And then sensation and perception were the earlier areas that were developed.
I've found history way more interesting lately. I have been thinking about doing just like a history of everything or innovation podcast. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story of like the guy who invented the EEG. Because yeah, it's just like physics.
Oh yeah. About his son? Yeah, his Berger, yeah. He measured his son's EEG. Yeah.
Cool stuff like that, where you're like, you can probably invent lots of things just going in one area. So I'm like, I have been thinking about looking for, because I haven't studied beyond my undergrad. So I'm like, should I try and do like a master's somewhere part-time just to then, because I don't think you're allowed to go and do a PhD without having done a master's. And I'm like,
It depends, actually. But you see, you're exploring what interests you.
Yes.
And not what a degree gives you. That's a privilege. You see, when you're younger, you don't think of it that way. You say, I need to be a profession. I need to have a profession. Okay, let's assume you are financially stable and the podcast creates the nest egg that you need. And you have this curiosity for, let's say, the history of science or the history of psychology, which I find really interesting. You focus on it. You enjoy it. Now, things are different now because of the internet, and you have information on the internet. If we go back to the 1970s, when I was a faculty member, there were libraries, big libraries. And I was a young faculty member at the University of Illinois in Champaign, and it had a remarkable library. It had over 5 million volumes. I would go down to their rare books collection, really have a good time. And I really just loved libraries, because what you start finding out when you dig and you touch the paper is that you start realizing that there were always great minds. They just had limited technologies. And the issue was, can you take that great mind, can you use that little bit of information, and can you leapfrog, use it, can you jump on the shoulders? So Google had on Google Scholar, it had this symbol on the shoulders of giants. And in a way, that's what science was all about. On the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of individuals who saw something that was unique. And now with better technologies, can you take those observations and can you expand?
Well, thanks for giving me a very calming overview.
I think you'd enjoy it. I think. Okay, I guess the test is, since we don't have libraries, they don't use, but when you get literally lost in the library with a pile of books and you can't wait to get to the next thing.
Interesting. Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's been delightful to talk to you. It's always cool when I go completely off track straight away and struggle to ever even get back on track because I'm having fun, which I've said plenty of times already today. So thanks for being such a curious guest.
Well, thank you.
Interested in my stupid questions?
Oh, your questions are good and your curiosity is good. I'd say just follow your curiosity. It's going to bring you nice places. I could say that my curiosity has enabled me to see the world in ways that I didn't expect to be able to see it in.
Congrats on coming up with such cool theories that genuinely are impacting people's lives around the planet. Well done.
As I said, the greatest frustration of my life being an academic was the thought that my ideas would not translate into the world. Well, listen, thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thanks a lot for the one and only Stephen Porges coming on the show, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I should say that I didn't just fob him off on his advice to follow my curiosities by saying goodbye. We did actually speak for another 45 minutes after that, and what you heard just then on the show was just editing for the purposes of ending the episode. I have actually since written out an entire season worth of ideas to explore the entire history of psychology on the show, which I'm very excited by. I have to say that personally, I loved Stephen's disregard for social constructs and even science itself. He was clearly aware that it's just stuff people have made up and currently seems to make sense. His open mind to my ideas like social pressure personality disorder and the fact that people just make up disorders, or that I could just build a career based on my curiosities in science as opposed to formal research for the sake of formality, that was really nice and I thought super cool. It was honestly incredible to see what he's done with his life following his curiosity, and I hope that it inspired you to also dig a little further on your own ideas that you might want to explore. And on that, thanks for listening. If you do have any comments or ideas for the show, I would love to hear them. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
But when we learn things, it's important to reflect. So I politely invite you to take a pause, rifle through the biggest ideas you just heard. So here's your opportunity to hit pause and have a think. Okay, did you wrestle with some insights? Information doesn't stick when we race from one podcast to the next without using our brain to play with the knowledge. So here's another go at a pause. Alrighty, I'll let you off to continue with your life now. If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
And other than that, please stay curious. Curious. Quote. Smiling for no reason.
Hello, I'm Vas Christodoulou, and I host the How To Academy podcast, a bi-weekly show exploring big ideas to transform our lives and the world. Our guests include Arthur Brooks on careers, Ruby Wax on mental health, Gabor Mate on trauma, Nicole LePera on healing your relationships, and many more. You'll also hear from iconic artists, politicians, and activists, including Naomi Klein, Gordon Brown, Anna Funder, and a whole host of other very impressive people. That's the How To Academy podcast, available bi-weekly wherever you listen.